Good afternoon, everyone. So, this week, me and Mia are going to be talking about intimate partner violence. So, to start off, there are different types of intimate partner violence. Intimate partner violence is any violence occurring between intimate partners who are living together or separated, also known as spousal violence. Firstly, there is physical violence, which may include hitting, punching, stabbing, and burning the partner. And there is also sexual violence, which is any form of violence which is done sexually, like rape and sexual assault. And then there is also financial violence, which may include restricting access to personal funds, stealing from the victim, refusing to allow the victim to work. And then lastly, there is emotional violence, which may include verbal attacks, degradation, threats about hurting their family members or pets, isolation from family members, and unwarranted accusations about infidelity. In terms of the measurement of intimate partner violence, one of the most common scale used was the Conflict Tactics Scale, or the CTS, by Strauss in 1979, or most recently is the revised version, which is the Revised Conflict Tactics Scale, or the CTS-2 by Strauss, Hamby, Bonnie McCoy, and Sugarman in 1996. The table here shows the scales that measure the items. Firstly, there is negotiation scale, which measures constructive problem solving, and an example item is suggesting a compromise during an argument. Next, there is a psychological scale, which measures verbal or indirect aggression, and the example item is swearing, threatening to hit. Next, there is physical assault scale, which measures physical aggression, and the example items are slapping and hitting. There is also the sexual coercion scale, which measures sexual aggression, and the example items are forcing partner to have sex. And then there is also injury scale, which measures consequences of aggression. The example items are visits to a doctor because of partner's aggression. Next, we'll be discussing about the causative factors of intimate partner violence. Firstly, there is patriarchy. Patriarchy refers to a broad set of cultural beliefs and values that support male dominance of women. And patriarchy is actually most common in a lot of cultures, like cultures in Asia and also in the Middle East, where they believe that male have the rights to dominate over women. And then there is also the social learning theory, uh, which is basically where the individual learns behaviors by watching others perform these behaviors. For example, they may have seen acts of violence by their parents. And then there is the evolutionary psychology theory, which is a selective pressure where new genes develop for survival. Um, a lot of researchers believe that this is due to how back in the days people were trying to survive due to war or due to difficult times, and it has caused them to build such characteristics where they are defensive and tough. And lastly, there is the power and control theory, which are 9 stages of relationships where one partner seeks excessive control and power over the other. This was founded by Mir et al. In 2022. So during the first stage of relationships that would look like an intimate partner violence relationship, usually the first stage would look wonderful and intense, and the husband would take an active interest in everything that their partner does or everywhere she goes. And he would want to be with her all the time, flatter her, and proclaims that he wants to spend the rest of his life with her. And usually the victim would see these obsessive and controlling behaviors as devotion rather than red flags. And then in stage two, that's when he begins to insist on knowing her whereabouts all the time. And he will begin to make decisions for her, demanding her loyalty to the relationship, etc. And then in stage three, the woman becomes adjusted to the attention and all the jealousies and the control that he displays. And he also makes a commitment to she makes the commitment to him, but usually under his control. And stage four, this is where usually the beginning of excessive control is through psychological and emotional abuse. He would begin to demand control over things dealing with her life, including how she dresses, her hairstyles, and how she should act. And if not followed, he would become angry. In stage five, this would usually be where the first physical abuse happened, and the victim will probably view the response as an outburst of anger due to their actions that will not happen again. Usually during this stage, the abuser would say sorry, and the victim will let it slide. In stage six, the psychological and physical abuse will occur again, and the victim will ask why he is repeating the actions. And usually the abuser will make it clear that it was because of her that she had hit her or slapped her. And then in stage seven, usually would occur simultaneously with stage six. Um, and this is usually the beginning of the isolation process. This is where the abuser would want to know who their partner is spending time with, and then they would forbid her from going out with that person, etc. And then in stage eight, this is where usually the partner or the victim would experience considerable emotional conflict and confusion. And this is also where the abuser blames the victim and the victim is confused about what is going wrong. And lastly, in stage nine, the abuser would increase his use of psychological threats and physical force to gain and maintain their control and dominance over their partner.
Okay, so next we're going to discuss about cycle of violence. It is best to report intimate partner violence to the police as soon as possible when it occurs. However, it is believed that over 70% of women who have made the decision to leave their abusive partner ended up returning home at least once. Next, please. Okay, so the reason why most of the victims ended up returning to their home at least once. 31% is for the sake of the children, 24% is to give the relationship another chance, 17% is because the partner promised to change, and 9% is because the lack of money or place to go for the victim. In this, you can see in this slide, there is an image of Cycle of Violence by Lenore Walker. The first phase is tension building phase. It includes interpersonal tension, poor communication, and victim feels fearful. And the second phase is acting out, which include violent, abusive incident. And lastly, it usually ends with honeymoon phase, which includes abuser apologize, affection between partners, and calm lack lack of tension. In this slide, we're going to talk more about the cycle or stage of violence. The first phase, tension built up. So mild physical, emotional, or verbal abuse may occur during this phase, and the victim may frequently attempt to soothe the abuser with varying degrees of success. And in the second phase, which is acute beating, this stage is marked by increased serious physical violence and the woman's inability to placate the bully or the abuser no matter what he does. And then lastly is the honeymoon or remorse stage, in which the attacker or abuser prof- profess regret for the conduct targeted and swears to mend his ways. This honeymoon phase comes after acute beating period. He can pay he or the abuser can pay a lot of attention to it, send her flowers, send his partner or victim gifts, gift and over her presence, and eventually the cycle of violence repeated and take a turn. Next slide, please. So next, we're going to talk about battered woman syndrome. The term battered woman syndrome, or BWS, was first coined by psychologist L.E. Lenore Walker in 1979, and it is based on a sample of volunteer middle-class women who had experienced violence. Walker feels that a set of behavioral, cognitive, and emotional characteristics are typical among women who had been physically and mentally abused by their husband for a long time. Leonard Walker, 1984, also contends that the beating relationship often goes through a cycle of three stages of violence. The first one is the tension-filled growth period. The second one is the acute beating event phase, and the third one is the honeymoon or remorse phase, as we discussed before. Next slide, please. And there are four stages of the battered woman syndrome. The first one is denial. In this stage, the victim either refuses to acknowledge that they are being mistreated or says it was just that once. And the second stage is guilt. The victim feels responsible for the maltreatment, possibly because of, as mentioned earlier, in the stage of relationship, there may be a time where the victim was blamed over and over again. And then the third stage is enlightenment. In this stage, the person accepts that their partner has an abusive personality and knows that they didn't deserve the violence. And the last stage is responsibility. In this stage, the victim acknowledges that the abuse is solely the perpetrator's fault. This is frequently the time when they will consider their choices for ending the relationship. Next slide, please. So, lastly, we have a case study here of a musician named Lesti Kejora. Lesti Kejora is a musician well known for her unique, booming voice in the dangdut community. She is one of the intimate partner violence victims. She recently became involved in a domestic abuse lawsuit with her husband, who is also an artist named Rizky Bilar. In her situation, she openly requested self-protection and reported her husband's violent behavior against her on police station. Lesti Kejora then continued to pursue peace based on a written promise that her husband would improve and was prepared to begin a new life with her child, who was at the time less than a year old. In this case, Lesti Kejora decided to make peace in the family and forgive her husband for the crime of domestic violence, for the sake of their child who still needs a father role. For this case study, we suggest that the couple continue to have protection and monitored by police or other parties. And we also suggest them to have or join a community-based intervention, cognitive behavioral therapy, couples therapy, psychoeducation, and a mandatory arrest for the betterer. Here are the references that we use for this PowerPoint. And that concludes our presentation for this topic. Thank you.